Why had no one asked her opinion in that briefing room? The fluorescent lights hummed above, harsh and unflattering, bouncing shadows across faces hardened by too many missions in too many forgotten places. They all sat around the steel table, men whose eyes carried the weight of war. Maps scattered, photos stained by coffee rings, a mission no one truly believed in. Lieutenant Commander Jake's jaw tightened as he scanned the satellite images. His silence carried more weight than his nervous voice. The CIA analyst's hands trembled when he pointed at the grainy compound circled in red. "Sir, we've lost 3 assets trying to get close to this place," he whispered. A silence fell, heavy, suffocating. Everyone at the table shifted, except her. Captain Vega sat back in her chair, her hands resting lightly on her knees as though to hide the fact that they wanted to clench. She was SEAL, not Navy, not theirs. She was an attachment, a ghost in the system, folded into their team at the last possible moment. A sniper with no file, no history anyone trusted. The men glanced at her from time to time, their eyes wary, measuring. She could feel their judgment like the humidity before a storm. She wasn't supposed to be here. But then again, she never really was supposed to be anywhere. Tank cracked his knuckles, leaning over the photographs. "This doesn't smell right, Skipper. Those heat signatures, that's not a handful of insurgents. That's a goddamn army." "Look at the fields," David Williams muttered, his medic's eyes narrowing. "They've cleared them for fire lanes, not farming. They've built a fortress." And then slid another photo across the table. 3 Americans, bound, executed, their bodies posed like a warning. The room went still. His jaw flexed. His men exchanged glances that said more than words ever could. They'd all seen death. But this was precision, a performance. Someone wanted them to know they were walking into a slaughterhouse. "They knew we were coming," Murphy muttered, his Boston accent thick with anger. "They always do," whispered before she could stop herself. Every head turned. Her words hung in the air, fragile, unwelcome. Studied her like a man deciding whether to trust a shadow. She stared back, unflinching. Finally, he gathered the photos with a sweep of his hand. "Gear up. We insert at 400. Trust no one but each other." No one nodded at her. No one said her name. She might as well have been a phantom already. The Black Hawk cut through the pre-dawn dark, its rotors blending into the jungle's natural roar. Its men roped down into a suffocating sea of green, each one moving with silent precision. She followed last, her boots sinking into mud that swallowed sound. Within minutes, cursed in Spanish, leeches already clinging to his neck. Williams whispered into his radio, tension in every syllable. "The LZ is compromised. Fresh footprints everywhere." Crouched low, scanning the shadows, her rifle cradled like an extension of her heartbeat. The jungle pulsed with hidden eyes. "Jesus Christ," Torres muttered, slapping at his arm. "It's like this whole place wants us dead." She didn't disagree. The jungle wasn't neutral ground, it chose sides. And tonight she wasn't sure whose side it was on. They moved in silence. Every step required cutting vines thick as cables. The machetes echoed like gunshots. "Tracks," Williams whispered, kneeling over soft earth. "Size 11, American issue, 6 hours old." Crouched beside him, her eyes narrowing. She knew the pattern, the staggered weight, the drag at the heel. This wasn't just some operator passing through. Whoever left that print was injured or carrying something heavy. She opened her mouth to speak, then shut it again. What did it matter? They wouldn't listen. A branch snapped. Murphy's fist shot up. Everyone dropped into the muck. "Movement at 2 o'clock, whispered voices. Steadied her breathing, slow, deliberate. Her scope found fragments of motion, shadows gliding with unnatural patience. Not villagers, not farmers. Hunters. Patrol. Her trigger finger twitched, but silent hand cut through the air. Hold, wait. The jungle itself seemed to stop breathing. Her heart pounded in her throat. She thought of the briefing, of the photos laid out like funeral cards. This wasn't recon. This was execution, and they were already inside the gallows. 2 hours later, Torres raised his hand. Tripwires shimmered in the sunlight like invisible veins. He disarmed the first with trembling hands. Claymore, modified, ball bearings, white phosphorus. Crouched beside him, studying the perfect camouflage, the deliberate placement. Too precise for locals, too cruel. Whoever made these traps knew Americans, knew their instincts. Her breath caught in her chest. This wasn't a minefield. This was a memory. For a flicker of a second, she saw another face, another compound, another day when she'd been the one behind the wires. She blinked and the ghosts were gone. His voice whispered in her ear, "I've got 2 more over here, 50 meters apart. This whole place is wired." Williams muttered, "It's not a kill zone, it's a graveyard." And then the shot came. A crack split the air. Torres spun and collapsed into the mud, blood blooming across his helmet. Gunfire erupted from every direction. Dove behind a tree, her rifle kicking against her shoulder as she returned fire. Muzzle flashes bloomed like stars in the shadows. "We're surrounded," roared. 20 positions at least. Hidden spider holes, heavy guns, coordinated fire. The jungle erupted into death. Bullets tore through bark, spitting splinters into her face. Grenades thudded in the distance. The air burned with cordite and fear. Contact front, left, right. His voice cracked with adrenaline. Torres lay bleeding, William scrambling over him, hands slick with blood. "He's alive," the medic shouted. "Concussion, head trauma, I can't hold him here." His world narrowed to her scope, her breath, her heartbeat. One hostile, another. Each one fell in her, but for every body that dropped, 3 more pressed in. Murphy's sniper rifle was useless in the chaos. He fired his sidearm blindly, teeth gritted, his thigh bleeding. "They've got us in a perfect L," he shouted. "Classic ambush." They'd been lured here, herded like prey. Williams shouted over the gunfire, "If one of those mines goes off, none of us are walking out of here." The world exploded again. RPGs screamed overhead, detonating against trees, showering them in burning splinters. Clutched his shoulder, blood soaking through his vest. "Doc, I can't feel my fingers." Shouted over the chaos, trying every frequency. Only static answered. Reloaded, teeth clenched. "Hopeless." The enemy's voices grew louder, closer. They weren't just attacking, they were closing in for the kill. Williams's voice broke as he held pressure on his wound. "Skipper, we're not getting out of here, not without a miracle." And against every code drilled into him, broadcasted desperation into the night. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Trident 6. 6 American operators, surrounded, heavy casualties. We need immediate assistance." Static. He tried again, his voice cracking. "We are 6 Americans. We are dying out here, if anyone hears this." The jungle swallowed his plea. Closed her eyes for half a breath. If this was how it ended, she thought, at least she wouldn't have to explain herself anymore. And then, a voice broke through the static. Calm, low, cold. "Trident 6, I have eyes on your position. 43 hostiles in a horseshoe formation. Stay low, cavalry's coming." Froze, the men looked at each other in disbelief. His blood ran cold. She knew that voice. But she'd been told she was dead. The shot cracked from far off. One hostile dropped, then another. Panic rippled through the enemy ranks. Whispered into his radio, voice trembling. "Confirm identity. Ghost Actual was listed KIA 2 years ago." A dry laugh, bitter and familiar, came back through the static. "Reports of my death were exaggerated. Now shut up and move northeast. 50 meters. Depression in the ground. Look for the dead tree pointing at the sky." The men glanced at, suspicion flashing in their eyes. Her hands shook on her rifle because she knew. They didn't understand who was out there, not yet. The ghost wasn't just some legend. The ghost was her. How could a dead woman be saving them? The first bullet tore through the jungle like a whispered judgment. A machine gunner's head snapped back, his body collapsing into the mud before he could scream. A heartbeat later, another hostile crumpled, clutching at the hole in his chest. The SEALs froze. It wasn't the chaos of random gunfire. This was something else, precise, surgical. Someone was hunting their hunters. "Sniper," Murphy muttered, his voice sharp with disbelief. But this wasn't the flat crack of a distant marksman picking off one or two. This was a rhythm, measured, relentless. Each shot another heartbeat stolen from the enemy. Didn't flinch, her hands didn't tremble. Her finger found the trigger, squeezed, released, cycled the bolt. Again, again, again. She hadn't fired a weapon in front of anyone in nearly 2 years. She had promised herself she wouldn't, but promises didn't matter now. Not when her brothers in arms were about to be slaughtered. "Ghost Actual, this is Trident 6's voice crackled over the radio, rough with adrenaline. "Confirm identity. Who the hell are you?" The calm reply carried through static, steel hidden beneath silk. "Your ticket out of hell. Now move northeast 50 meters, depression in the ground. You'll know it when you see it." Williams glanced then at the bleeding men sprawled in the mud. "Sir, we can't move them under this fire." Another shot cracked. A grenade-wielding fighter spun backward, lifeless before he hit the dirt. "You can now," Ghost whispered through the net. The jungle became a storm. Scope cut through shadow, her body motionless but her mind calculating every angle. She didn't aim for chaos. She aimed for fear. Take the leaders first, then the machine gunners, then anyone who tried to rally the rest. The enemy line fractured like brittle glass. Men screamed in Arabic, Pashto, Farsi, different tongues woven together by one language, terror. They shouted about a phantom, a ghost, firing into shadows, into trees, into each other. Clutching his shattered shoulder, blinked up through sweat and blood. "Jesus Christ, she's real." Murphy's Boston accent thickened as he barked over the gunfire. "Move, get Tors up, we've got a window." Williams dragged Tors, half-conscious and bleeding, while Murphy laid down suppressive fire. Shots opened corridors through the kill box, tearing gaps in the noose, tightening around them. Still, every step felt like drowning. The jungle clung, the mud sucked, their brothers bled. And through it all, Ghost's voice whispered calmly in their ears. "Keep left 2 o'clock clear. Move 10 seconds, you're safe." From her vantage point, she saw everything. The enemy's desperation, the Americans' agony, the jungle itself breathing with every pull of her trigger. But inside her chest, something else roared. She had told herself she was done with this, that the jungle could have her, that she would never fire for anyone again. Yet here she was, guiding men she barely knew, saving them one shot at a time. And with every kill, the ghosts whispered louder. "You couldn't save us. You hid while we screamed." She shook it off. She didn't have time to drown in memory, not yet. The depression loomed ahead, a natural bowl in the earth, camouflaged by roots and vines. To the SEALs, it was salvation. It was a sanctuary she had carved years ago, a place prepared not for her survival, but for moments exactly like this. Murphy dragged Tors down the slope, his face pale with blood loss. Williams followed, his hands red to the elbows, trying to keep alive. Moved last, his rifle barking controlled bursts, his jaw tight with the weight of command. They stumbled into the depression, gasping, bleeding, desperate. And then silence. The gunfire outside faltered. Men shouted, confused, panicked. No one wanted to push forward into the invisible crosshairs. "Trident 6, you're in cover," his voice whispered through the net. "Keep your heads down, I'll handle the rest." William stared at, disbelief in his eyes. "Sir, who is she?" His expression was unreadable. "A ghost." Shifted position, crawling through the canopy with a predator's patience. Her suit blended perfectly with vines and moss. She never fired more than 3 shots from one location, always moving, always one step ahead. Through her scope, she found a squad leader barking orders, waving men forward. One squeeze, his throat exploded in a red spray. 2 more dropped behind him. The survivors broke. Some fired wildly into the trees, others fled. A few froze, waiting for death. She granted it. The jungle was hers, the silence hers. Each pull of the trigger was a prayer, each kill a confession. She whispered their names in her head. Martinez, brothers she had lost 2 years ago in the same green hell. She whispered their names like rosary beads. Each shot was for them, each corpse a ledger marked. And still the guilt clawed at her. Why them, why not me? Ghost Actual's voice crackled, breaking her spiral. We've stabilized Tors and for now, but we need extraction. Do you copy? Extraction. Her teeth clenched. Extraction. She could lead them out. She could guide them back to the world, but she knew what waited there for her. Questions, files, chains, people demanding explanations she couldn't give. No. She had chosen this graveyard. This is your extraction, she whispered instead. Follow my lead and you'll live, but you don't get to wait for angels, not here, not tonight. Hesitated, but there was steel in her tone. He didn't argue. The jungle shuddered as more hostiles pushed forward. Reinforcements, dozens, maybe more. Settled into another firing position, her scope tracing over faces, rifles, shadows. Her finger brushed the trigger, breath steady. Trident 6, she whispered, her voice a ghost of its own. You've got 90 seconds. When my rifle goes loud, you run, don't stop, don't look back, just live. Through her scope, she saw glance into the trees as if trying to find her, but his eyes never touched her position. They couldn't. No one ever did. She almost smiled. Almost. Then she fired. The jungle erupted in thunder. Her rifle barked, precise and merciless, guiding the seals out of the kill zone one step at a time. The enemy faltered, panicked, turned on themselves. The Americans stumbled forward, bleeding but alive, pulled by her voice, shielded by her vengeance. Every shot was agony and absolution all at once. Every kill reminded her of who she had become. Not Vega, not the soldier who had once worn a flag on her shoulder. Something else. Something the jungle had made her. A ghost. And as dragged his wounded men into the cover of the depression, her voice crackled through the radio one last time, low and steady, carrying both comfort and warning. Welcome to my jungle. Now let's even the odds. Did her voice sound like someone they had buried? The men crouched low in the depression, breath ragged, weapons trembling from exhaustion and adrenaline. The earth walls around them offered fragile cover, but above, just meters away, the jungle boiled with enemies regrouping, shouting, hunting. Williams pressed bloody hands against chest, whispering, "Stay with me, Tank. Don't you dare go dark on me." Murphy cursed under his breath as he tightened his improvised tourniquet, his legs slick with blood. Tors lay half-conscious against a tree root, pupils uneven, his voice slurred. "Skipper, the sky won't stop spinning." Every man carried the look of someone already halfway to the grave. And yet, the enemy wasn't closing in, not yet. Because every time a hostile tried to move closer, he dropped, precise shots from nowhere. Clean, efficient, terrifying. Ghost. His jaw tightened as he keyed his mic. Ghost Actual, whoever you are, why are you here? The reply was almost conversational, calm, cold, almost human. Because you weren't meant to die today. The silence that followed was heavier than the gunfire had been. Williams whispered too, eyes wide. "Sir, that voice, I've heard stories. A sniper who went missing, supposedly dead. They said she'd gone feral in the jungle." Murphy's laugh was bitter, breathless. "Bullshit. Ghosts a myth. A bedtime story we tell rookies so they learn to shut up and move quiet." But didn't laugh. He stared into the shadows beyond the depression. His instincts, the same ones that had dragged him through 20 years of war, told him the truth. Whoever Ghost was, she wasn't just a story. She was real. And she was watching them. Lay prone in the canopy, her rifle cradled like prayer. Through her scope, she saw them, steady, Williams desperate, bleeding pale, Torres slipping further into concussion, Murphy clutching his own thigh. Men she did not know, yet men she could not let die. Her finger brushed the trigger, but her eyes closed for a beat too long. Because every face she saw was haunted by another. Martinez, the brothers she'd lost 2 years ago in this same hell. She whispered their names under her breath, each syllable a chain dragging her deeper into memory. The night the ambush took them. The night she bled into the mud, helpless hiding while their screams split the darkness. Her hands trembled, not from fear, from memory. She opened her eyes, the scope steadied, another hostile dropped. The jungle had no time for grief. Movement, Murphy hissed, raising his pistol. Above them, branches shifted. Shadows pressed closer, disciplined this time, flanking carefully. The panic from before had hardened into something colder. Reinforcements, men who hadn't yet tasted the ghost's bite. "Skipper," Williams said, panic in his voice. "We can't stay pinned. If they push again, we're done." Swallowed, options dwindled to nothing. Before he could answer, Ghost's voice bled into their headsets. "You've got 40 more closing in from the south. Disciplines, better equipped, not the same rabble. I can stall them, but not forever." Groaned through clenched teeth, whispering, Why help us? You don't even know us." A pause, static, then a voice soft as smoke. "I know what it's like to be left behind." Felt the words cut deeper than the gunfire. He remembered her now, not a myth, not a bedtime story, a name whispered in briefing rooms. A sniper, female, lethal, brilliant, lost with her unit, officially listed KIA, body never recovered. Vega. The ghost wasn't a story, she was one of their own. And she had been out here, alone for years. She shifted firing positions, crawling low, her suit blending with roots and moss. Every movement was muscle memory now, silent, patient, practiced by 2 years of becoming less human and more something else. Through her scope she marked the incoming column, professionals, not insurgent rabble, military trained, their spacing was perfect, weapons clean, their eyes sharp. Whoever sent them hadn't underestimated this fight. She exhaled, her scope found the point man, one shot, the column halted, she shifted, fired again, a squad leader collapsed. They returned fire instantly, disciplined arcs of suppression sweeping the canopy. But she was already gone, melting into another hide. Their rounds chewed through empty leaves. She smiled without joy, "You'll never find me." In the depression, bullets cut overhead, snapping branches, raining bark. Torres winced, his voice groggy, "Skipper, who the hell is she?" No one answered. Because none of them truly knew. Williams pressed harder against wound, his hands shaking. "We're running out of time. He's going into shock. If we don't move soon," his voice broke. "He won't make it." Clenched his teeth, helpless. They had no air support, no artillery, no QRF, just one unseen ghost holding back a tide. He pressed his mic. "Ghost actual, we need an exit now." The reply came low, measured. "You'll have one, but you won't like it." Slid into another firing position, her body merging with the earth. She unwrapped a suppressed M4 she'd cached weeks earlier. Tonight wasn't about sniper patience, it was about fury. Her finger flicked the selector, full auto. The jungle erupted. She stitched fire across the enemy flank, cutting down 3, 4, 5 men in seconds. Their return fire sprayed wildly, but she was already moving, ghosting to another hide, another angle. Then her roared, thunder splitting the canopy. A man with an RPG disintegrated in a spray of red. Another shot shattered a machine gun nest. Chaos, panic, confusion. The SEALs below heard the storm as though heaven itself had opened fire. Murphy shook his head, disbelief in his voice. "That's one person. That's not possible." Williams whispered, "She's not fighting for herself." His eyes flicked to, bleeding out beneath his hands. "She's fighting for us." His chest heaved, sweat blurred her scope, her hands ached from recoil. Still she moved, still she killed. But inside something cracked. Because every man who fell reminded her of someone she couldn't save. Every trigger pull dragged her back to that night. The screams, the blood, the silence after. She pressed her forehead into the stock of her rifle, whispering names no one else could hear. "Forgive me. Forgive me. Forgive me." Ghost Actual's voice pulled her back. "We can't hold, we need to move now. What's your plan?" Her breathing slowed, she checked the wind. She counted the seconds, she measured the weight of her ghosts. "Northwest, old fire base, 2 clicks, you move when I say, not before. When you hear thunder, you run." Williams frowned, glancing at thunder. Murphy reloaded his pistol with shaking hands. "You heard her. Whatever she means, we follow it." His voice was grim. "We don't have another choice." Reached her final cache, weapons wrapped in oilcloth, ammunition stacked neatly, her cathedral of vengeance. She unwrapped the last tool, a claymore rigged to a remote trigger. She planted it carefully, her movements methodical, her breath steady. The jungle was alive with enemy voices. They were closing, fast. She pressed her mic. "Trident 6, ready." His voice came back hoarse, "Ready." Her thumb pressed the trigger. Thunder ripped through the jungle. The claymore detonated with a roar, shredding the night, tearing through enemy ranks. Screams rose, fire bloomed. "Now," whispered her voice, both command and prayer, "run." The SEALs moved, broken bodies dragged through mud, rifles spitting desperate bursts. Williams hauled on the improvised stretcher, his face contorted with effort. Murphy limped, teeth gritted, Tor's swaying between his grip. And through it all, Ghost's rifle spoke again and again, guiding them, shielding them, dragging them toward the promise of survival. By the time they reached the old fire base, every man was bleeding, staggering, barely holding. The ruins loomed out of the jungle, a skeleton of sandbags and rusted metal, half consumed by vines. To them, it looked like heaven. They collapsed into cover, gasping, broken. Above them, the gunfire receded, fading into distant echoes. And then silence. Williams pressed trembling fingers against his neck. Pulse is weak. He needs a medevac now. Pressed his mic, his voice raw. "Ghost Actual, we made it, but we won't last here without support. Where are you?" The reply was quiet, distant, almost sorrowful. "Closer than you think." But none of them saw her. Because she didn't step into the open, not yet. She stayed where she belonged. In the shadows. The ghost of the jungle, why hadn't she died with them? The question followed her through every breath, every pull of the trigger. Every night she lay awake in the canopy, listening to the insects drown out her ghosts. Now, as battered team collapsed into the ruins of the old fire base, the question clawed at her louder than ever. She had saved them, but she hadn't saved the ones who mattered most. The base was little more than bones, sandbags burst and rotting, metal struts swallowed by vines, a crater from an old mortar scar gouged into the earth. Yet for the SEALs, it was shelter, a defensible position, something to cling to in the storm. Williams dropped to his knees, fumbling through medical gear, his hands slick with blood. "He's crashing," he muttered, voice trembling. "BP is bottoming out. I need fluids. I need real gear. Not this." "Doc," said sharply, crouching beside him, "you'll do what you can. We hold here until we've got another option." Murphy leaned against a crumbling wall, his leg bandaged tight, sweat dripping down his face. His pistol sat loose in his hand, but his eyes never stopped scanning the jungle. Torres sat slumped against a rusted ammo crate, head cradled in his hands. "Everything's spinning," he whispered. They were breaking apart, piece by piece. And still the jungle breathed outside, enemies moving, whispering, regrouping. The silence between bursts of distant gunfire was worse than the noise. Keyed his mic, his voice low. "Ghost Actual, we're in the fire base. Defensive perimeter set, but we need to know, what are we facing?" The answer slid through static, calm and clinical. "Company strength element. At least 70 hostiles in your sector, equipped, coordinated, not insurgents, soldiers." Williams looked up from his hands shaking. 70? Jesus Christ, we're 6 men and 2 of us are half dead." "6 and a ghost," Murphy muttered under his breath. Crouched in the canopy above them, her scope sweeping arcs of jungle. Through her rifle's glass, she saw the shapes moving. She read their formations like an old, familiar language. Not insurgents, professionals. Her stomach twisted, because she knew the signatures of their movements, the way they flanked, the way they searched, the way they hunted. She had trained them once, before everything fell apart. The memories cut sharp and fast. She saw herself in clean fatigues, standing in a dusty courtyard overseas, shouting commands at men who moved with precision. Not Americans, not allies. Locals, men paid, equipped, trained by the same governments who would later call them enemies. She had taught them how to fire from cover, how to move silently, how to read terrain like scripture. And now those same tactics crawled toward her in the jungle. She had trained the men hunting them tonight. Her finger pressed against the trigger, hard enough to whiten her knuckle. She whispered to herself, "This is my fault." In the fire base, Williams finally looked up, exhaustion hollowing his eyes. "He's stable for now, but he won't last another hour without." Pressed his hands against his face for a moment. When he lowered them, his jaw was set. "Ghost Actual, we need extraction coordinates. If you've got comms stronger than ours." Cut him off, her voice flat. "There's no extraction. Not tonight. Your radios are jammed. Birds can't fly through this weather system, not in time. The only thing keeping you alive is that they don't know how many of us are out here." "Us?" Murphy scoffed. "Far as I can tell, it's one ghost with a rifle." But his words carried something beneath the sarcasm, not disbelief, respect. Keyed the mic again. His voice had changed, less suspicion, more command. "If you're right, then what's the play?" The reply came steady, unshaken. "You wait, you dig in, and when the storm comes, you move when I tell you." The men exchanged glances. None of them liked it, but none of them had a better option. Williams pulled a blood-soaked blanket over his chest, murmuring, "Just hold on, hold on." Torres drifted into unconsciousness, his lips moving in prayers that dissolved into silence. Murphy reloaded with slow, deliberate hands, his legs shaking from pain, and stared into the jungle, thinking about the voice. He had heard whispers in briefings, names spoken softly by men who didn't believe in myths but didn't want to risk ignoring them. A sniper female, brilliant, gone missing. And now saving them. But at what cost? Shifted positions, crawling down into the old base. She moved like smoke, silent, barely human. She didn't step into the firelight. She stayed in the shadows, her face hidden beneath mud and leaves, her suit dripping with dew. Still they felt her presence, a ripple in the air. Murphy froze, his pistol halfway raised. Holy shit. Williams's eyes widened. "It's her." Stood slowly, Ghost Actual. She didn't answer. Her rifle rested against her shoulder, her breathing steady. Only her eyes flickered, catching light. "Haunted eyes." Williams whispered, almost reverent, "Captain Vega." The name struck the air like lightning. Murphy's mouth opened, then closed. Torres stirred faintly, whispering the name like it belonged in a legend. His jaw tightened. He knew it, he had suspected, now it was truth. Vega presumed dead, buried in files, ghosted from memory. And here she was, alive. Alive but broken. Her voice was low, nearly a growl. Names don't matter. But Williams shook his head. They do. We've heard the stories, the ambush, your team. Everyone thought you died. Her laugh was sharp, humorless. I did. The part that mattered died with them. The silence that followed was heavy. Stirred, his voice weak. Then why save us? Her eyes hardened. Because I couldn't save them. For a long moment, no one spoke. The jungle outside breathed restless. Shadows moved. The storm gathered. Inside the fire base, 6 broken men sat with a woman who should have been dead, whose presence reason, whose skill was the only thread holding them above the grave. Finally broke the silence, his voice low, steady. Then tonight you're one of us. Her eyes flickered. For the briefest heartbeat the armor cracked. Something human shone through. And then it was gone. Her rifle lifted again, her voice flat. They're coming. The first shots came seconds later. Suppressive fire chewed through vines and sandbags. Grenades thudded against earth. Voices shouted in harsh, disciplined bursts. The storm had arrived. The SEALs braced. Shouted orders, his voice steady despite the chaos. Murphy fired from cover, each shot echoing with pain in his leg. Williams pressed flat, shielding him with his own body. Torres blinked awake, disoriented but clutching his weapon with trembling hands. And Ghost moved like shadow, her rifle cracking, her silhouette flickering between flashes of muzzle fire. The jungle roared. The fire base shook. And in the heart of it she fought, not just the enemy pressing in, but the ghosts clawing at her from within. Because even as she killed to save them, another question echoed through her chest. How many lives could she take before the faces of the dead finally let her go? Why did the jungle feel alive when it wanted them dead? The fire base trembled with violence. Bullets shredded the vines, ripping leaves into confetti. Sandbags burst, spilling ancient dirt across the ground. The crack of AKs blended with the dull thud of grenades, each blast rattling through broken bones and already frayed nerves. Williams pressed himself against a crumbling wall, his hands never leaving his chest. Pressure's dropping, he shouted, voice ragged. I can't hold him much longer. Murphy fired in short, sharp bursts, his leg trembling, pain forcing curses through clenched teeth. Torres swayed where he sat, half-conscious but clinging to his rifle as though the steel could anchor him to reality. Moved like stone under fire, directing, steadying, pulling his men around the wounded. His jaw clenched with every passing second. And then there was her. Vega moved along the perimeter like smoke, her suit torn, face streaked with mud, eyes burning with a relentless calm. She wasn't barking orders, wasn't shouting. Her rifle spoke for her. Every time the enemy surged, she cut them down, one by one. But the storm didn't break. It built. From her vantage, she read the assault as if it were a book. The spacing of the fighters, the rhythm of their fire, the way they leaned on cover. She knew it because she had taught it. These weren't random insurgents. They were men sharpened on her own blade. She remembered their faces in training yards, wide-eyed, hungry, desperate to please. She had given them structure, discipline, skill. And now, 2 years later, they carried that discipline back into her sights, aiming to kill her and the men she now shielded. Her stomach twisted as she squeezed the trigger. A man she'd once corrected on his stance crumpled beneath her shot. Another, whose eagerness she had once mistaken for promise, dropped into the mud. Her own lessons were killing her. Inside the base, Williams growled through blood-soaked hands. I need more light. I can't see what I'm doing. Negative, snapped, firing from cover. You turn on light, you make us a target. I'm already losing him, Williams bit back, his voice cracking. Damn it, Skipper, I need. Doc. The voice was hers, calm, unshaken. Williams looked up. crouched in the shadows, sliding something toward him, a packet from her own cache, medical gear clean wrapped, untouched. Her eyes locked with his. "Use it." Williams froze. His training screamed at him not to trust anything outside their supply chain, but one look at her face, the absolute steadiness, the certainty, told him she had already made the decision for him. He tore the packet open, his hands moving faster now. His breathing steadied, slightly, barely, but it was something. The firefight stretched into hours. Bursts of violence, lulls filled with ragged breathing, then more fire. The men fought on instinct, every magazine a heartbeat closer to empty. Moved between hides like a phantom, never firing from the same angle twice. The enemy shouted, confused, their discipline cracking as bodies fell to her steady rhythm. But even she could feel it. They weren't breaking, not yet. They were testing her, probing, measuring. She knew what came next. The full weight of them. During one lull, Murphy leaned his head against the wall, sweat dripping into his eyes. "I gotta ask," he muttered between breaths, "you really her, Captain Vega?" Silence. Reloaded, her movements clean, precise. She didn't look at him. "Names don't matter here." Murphy snorted. "Tell that to the ghosts who follow us home." Something flickered in her expression, the smallest fracture. She whispered, barely audible, "They don't follow, they stay." And then she rose again, rifle at her shoulder, cutting down another wave before it reached the wall. Watched her. He had seen elite operators under fire before, calm under chaos, focused under fury, but she was something else. She wasn't calm because she controlled fear. She was calm because fear no longer applied. The woman moving like a shadow along his line wasn't the officer once listed on rosters. She was something reborn in blood and guilt. A ghost, yes, but one who still chose to fight for the living. The next push came harder. Mortars thudded beyond the tree line, shells screaming overhead. One landed inside the base, blowing sandbags into dust, hurling tores across the ground. He coughed blood, his hands clutching his ears. "Skipper, I can't hear." Williams dragged him behind cover, his own ears ringing. Murphy fired wildly, teeth bared in pain. "They're gonna level this place." Barked into the net. "Ghost Actual, we're about to be overrun. What's your call?" Her voice came sharp. "Hold." "Hold," Murphy spat. "We're dying in here." "Hold." Crawled into her hidden cache beneath a collapsed wall. Her hands brushed over cold steel, caches she had buried long ago. Ammunition, explosives, old relics of her survival. She wired claymores with practiced hands, her fingers steady despite the mortar fire overhead. Every movement carried her deeper into memory. Her team 2 years ago had been overrun in a base just like this. She had lain broken in a shell crater, listening as they screamed, as they begged for help she couldn't give. She remembered's voice, Martinez's laughter turning into terror, prayers cutting short. She had done nothing then. Tonight would be different. She crawled back into the open, detonator in hand. Her voice slid through the SEALs' headsets, calm as ever. "On my mark, collapse to the center." Didn't hesitate, copy. The men pulled inward, dragging their wounded. His eyes narrowed as the jungle lit with muzzle flashes. She waited, let them surge closer. And then she triggered the detonators. The ground erupted, claymores shredded through the advancing lines. Fireballs rolled across vines and roots, the screams of men echoing into the night. The earth shook beneath the violence. The SEALs stared, wide-eyed, as the kill zone became a graveyard. Williams whispered, "My God." Exhaled, slow, steady, her rifle lifted again. "No," she said softly, "not God." The attack broke, not completely, but enough. The survivors scattered into the jungle, their formations shattered. Sporadic fire cracked, but the organized assault had dissolved. For now, inside the base, the SEALs slumped against walls, bleeding, exhausted. Williams sagged beside, whose breathing had steadied by fragile degrees. Murphy tore another strip of fabric to bind his leg, his hands trembling. Torres sat dazed, whispering nonsense through split lips. And finally looked at her, really looked. "Captain Vega," he said, voice low, "you saved us." Her eyes lifted from her scope, haunted, hollow. "I didn't save anyone," she whispered. "I'm just buying time." The silence that followed was thicker than the smoke. Wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that survival mattered, that this fight wasn't pointless. But he saw the ghosts in her eyes. And he knew she wasn't fighting for herself. She was fighting to make up for something she could never undo. The jungle quieted. For the moment, they were alive. But every man in that ruined fire base knew the storm wasn't over. It was only circling, waiting. And the woman crouched among them, the ghost they had thought dead, was the only thing standing between their fragile lives and the endless green grave that waited outside. And though she didn't say it, the question still echoed in her chest. Not why she had lived, but how much longer she could keep carrying the weight of being the one who had. Why hadn't the shooting stopped in her head? The fire base lay in ruins, smoke curling from shattered sandbags, vines scorched by fire, the ground painted with mud and blood. The air still buzzed with the memory of detonations, though silence had returned for now. A silence too heavy, too fragile. Williams knelt in the dirt, his gloves soaked crimson as he adjusted the IV line he had finally managed to start in his arm. The big man lay pale and barely conscious, his chest rising shallowly. Every breath sounded like a debt unpaid. Torres lay against the crater wall, head lolling, one eye swollen shut. His voice rasped through cracked lips. "Still, spinning, skipper." Murphy sat slumped with his back to twisted steel, his pistol in his lap. His bandaged thigh throbbed, but his eyes stayed sharp, scanning the shadows. He wasn't fighting his body anymore. He was fighting to stay awake. Crouched near the edge, rifle steady, eyes unblinking. He wasn't just looking outward. He was studying her. "Vega." "Ghost." She knelt just beyond the light of their battered lamps, suit blending with shadow, her rifle balanced across her knees. Her eyes never moved from the jungle, but her stillness carried something fractured. She wasn't calm. She was braced, like someone holding back a tide only she could see. Keyed his mic, though the distance between them was only a dozen feet. "Ghost actual," he said, his voice low, even. "We need to talk about." Her reply came sharp. "There isn't one." Murphy snorted bitterly, rubbing his face. "Figures. Whole damn jungle's wired and the skis are locked down. We're just corpses waiting for tags." "Not yet," said. His gaze stayed on her. "She's been keeping us alive, and she's got more fight in her than the rest of us put together." That finally made her turn. Her eyes, mud-streaked, hollow, burning, met his. "I'm not fighting for you." The silence was heavy. Williams froze mid-bandage. Murphy's brows furrowed. Even Torres, dazed and concussed, lifted his head slightly. "Didn't blink, then who?" Her jaw clenched, her eyes flicked away, back to the trees, back to the ghosts. The memory clawed at her again. The night her unit had been overrun. She had lain in a shell crater with her leg broken, rifle scope cracked, unable to move. She had listened as her brothers screamed in the dark, Martinez begging for mercy, crying out for his mother, choking on his own blood. She had listened and done nothing. Survivor's guilt wasn't just a phrase. It was a knife twisting every second. Every shot she fired now was a confession. Every body she dropped was a prayer. But prayers never brought the dead back. Williams broke the silence, his voice trembling with exhaustion. "Captain Vega, why didn't you come back? Why stay out here all this time?" Her eyes flicked toward him, sharp enough to cut. "Because I belong here." His voice was steady. "Bullshit. No one belongs in hell." Her laugh was bitter, hollow. "Then why do I feel at home?" No one answered. Because none of them had an answer. The jungle outside shifted. Not whispers this time, not probing shots. Movement heavy, coordinated. His head tilted slightly, her breathing slowed. "They're bringing more," she whispered. Murphy cursed under his breath. "More? How many goddamn armies do they have out here?" "Enough," said his voice cold. "Enough to bury us." Williams's hands shook on his chest. "He won't survive another push, Skipper. If they hit again, he's gone." His voice cut through, sharp as a blade. "Then we don't let them hit again." She moved into the shadows, her body flowing like smoke, and for a moment the SEALs forgot she was flesh and blood at all. But didn't. He watched the way her shoulders tensed, the way her rifle trembled for a fraction of a second before steadying. And he realized something the others hadn't yet. She wasn't invincible. She was breaking herself every second she stayed. "Ghost," he said into the mic, his voice quiet, meant only for her. A pause. "What?" "You can't carry it forever." Her laugh was low, bitter. "Watch me." "You're ghosts," he pressed. "They don't want this for you, they'd want you to live." Her silence was long, heavy. And when she finally spoke, her voice cracked for the first time. "They screamed while I hid. They begged while I stayed silent. You tell me they want me to live." His throat tightened. But before he could reply, the jungle answered for them. Gunfire. The night lit with tracer rounds, carving streaks of fire through the canopy. Mortars thumped, shells exploding against the earth walls. The entire fire base shook under the weight of the assault. "Contact," Murphy shouted, forcing himself upright, firing into the night. Williams dragged deeper into cover, his voice breaking. "Stay with me, stay with me." Torres fumbled with his rifle, barely conscious, but still firing blind into the dark. Barked orders, moving like stone against the storm. And rose into the breach, her rifle cracking with ruthless rhythm, her silhouette illuminated in flashes of fire. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was there, fighting with them. The enemy surged, wave after wave, their discipline ironclad, their numbers overwhelming. Dropped them one after another, but still they pressed, their boots crunching closer, their voices rising in a deadly chant. She shifted positions, fired, moved again, but even she could feel it. This was different. This was final. Inside the base, Williams screamed over the chaos. "Skipper, we can't hold. We're out of ammo, out of time." Murphy's pistol clicked empty. He cursed, fumbling for a fresh mag. Torres collapsed, unconscious again, his body twitching with every nearby blast. His jaw clenched, his eyes flicked toward. "Ghost Actual, tell me you've got a miracle left." Her scope settled on a squad leader, raising his hand to signal the next wave. She exhaled, pulled the trigger. The man fell. She whispered, so softly none of them could hear. "I don't have miracles, only ghosts." The assault crashed against the fire base like a tide against rock. And somehow, impossibly, the rock still held. Because one woman, broken and unbowed, stood in the shadows, her rifle speaking for the dead who had never stopped screaming in her ears. Why did it always feel quietest right before the world ended? The jungle had gone still. The fire base lay in tatters, walls caved, sandbags shredded, weapons half spent. Smoke curled into the canopy like a warning flare, and the air hung thick with the sour weight of blood and cordite. The SEALs clung to what little strength they had left. Williams pressed trembling hands against his wound, whispering, "Stay with me. Don't you dare stop." Murphy leaned against the wall, his pistol shaking in his grasp, face pale with blood loss. Torres drifted in and out, his breath shallow and broken, words lost in fever. crouched near the edge, his rifle steady though his eyes burned with fatigue. He was out of miracles, out of time. And then drums. Not real drums, but the sound of boots, 100 of them, maybe more, moving as one, pounding against the earth. The jungle was coming for them, all of it. Vega adjusted her scope, her cheek pressed against the cold steel of her rifle. She counted the movement in the tree line, the shadows shifting, the disciplined flanks spreading out like claws. This wasn't just another push. This was the final strike, the hammer. She had seen it before, overwhelming force collapsing like a wave, and she knew what it meant. No survivors. Her stomach twisted, not from fear, from memory. 2 years ago, she had felt the same vibration in the earth, the same pressure in her chest, the same certainty that everything she loved was about to be swallowed. Back then she had survived by accident, by chance. Tonight, if she survived at all, it would not be by chance. It would be by choice. Movement, Murphy croaked, raising his pistol, eyes wide with disbelief. There's too many. Williams's hands shook as he bent over. Skipper, we can't fight that. We won't last 60 seconds. His jaw clenched. He keyed his mic, voice low. Ghost Actual, you've kept us alive this long. Tell me you've got something left. The reply came cold. There's always something left. She moved through the ruins like a wraith, planting claymores, checking angles, lining. Every movement was muscle memory now. Every gesture a conversation with ghosts. Her fingers brushed the detonator she had wired earlier. She whispered names under her breath. Martinez. She saw them in every shadow, heard them in every burst of gunfire. This was the fight she owed them. This was the fight she would not lose. The jungle erupted. Voices shouting, boots pounding, muzzles flashing. The enemy surged, pouring fire into the base, mortars screaming overhead. Explosions ripped sandbags apart, throwing dirt into the air like thunderclouds. The SEALs returned fire, broken and bleeding but refusing to lay down. Murphy emptied his last pistol mag, his hand shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. Torres fired blindly, his body convulsing with pain. Williams screamed over the chaos as he pressed harder on his wound, blood soaking his uniform. And fought like stone, firing in measured bursts, every round placed with grim precision. But it wasn't enough. The tide was too heavy. The walls collapsed, the base crumbled, the jungle swallowed. And then, thunder triggered the claymores. The jungle lit in fire, explosions tearing through enemy ranks, shredding formations, throwing bodies into the mud. Screams rose, swallowed by smoke and flame. Her roared, dropping squad leaders, shredding machine gunners. Every shot was final, absolute. She moved like a shadow, never in the same place twice. One moment above them in the canopy, the next on the far flank, then inside the ruin, muzzle flashes carving death from the smoke. She wasn't just fighting. She was burning herself alive. Saw it the way her rifle cracked again and again, the way her body flowed, the way the enemy collapsed under her fury. She was no longer holding the line. She was the line. But even fury had limits. Her ammo was running dry, her body shook with exhaustion, her breath came ragged. And still the tide pressed in. Ghost shouted into the net, "We're breaking, what's your play?" Her reply came sharp, almost savage. "You don't play against the tide, you break it." She reached into her final cache. The satchel charge sat heavy in her hand, its weight familiar. She armed it without hesitation, crawling low through the mud, bullets sparking off steel above her. Her mind whispered, "This is it. This is how it ends." But another voice whispered louder, "Not for them. Not this time." She slid into place, wires humming under her fingers. Every scream of her fallen team echoed in her ears. And then, the sky cracked. Not mortars, not thunder. Rotors, head snapped up, birds inbound. Williams's eyes filled with tears. Murphy barked a bitter laugh. About damn time. But froze. Her hands shook on the detonator. Rotors meant extraction, survival, escape. Rotors meant leaving. And leaving meant carrying her ghosts out of the jungle, not burying them where they belonged. Ghost Actual said, his voice firm, urgent. The birds are here, time to move. She didn't reply. She pressed her back against the shattered wall, eyes locked on the tree line. The enemy was still coming. Even with birds overhead, even with fire raining down from above, they pressed forward, relentless. If the seals tried to move now, they'd be cut down before reaching the landing zone. It needed cover. It needed someone to stay. Williams shouted over the roar of gunfire. We can't leave without you. Captain Vega, you're coming with us. Her eyes flickered toward him. For the first time, they weren't hollow. They were alive. Alive and breaking. I don't leave ghosts behind. His jaw clenched. You're not a ghost, you're flesh and blood, and if you stay, you're gone for good. She looked at him, and for the briefest heartbeat, she almost believed him. Almost. But the tide pressed closer. The enemy surged. The fire base groaned under its own death. And Vega lifted her rifle once more. The seals dragged their wounded toward the sound of rotors, every step a miracle of willpower. Williams hauled with tears streaking mud across his face. Murphy limped, teeth clenched, his pistol out though he had barely a round left. Covered the rear, his jaw set like iron. And above them, through the storm of fire and blood, his voice crackled through the net one last time. Run! Her rifle thundered. Her detonators roared. Her ghost screamed. And the jungle burned. Why did silence feel heavier than gunfire? The rotors pounded the air, lifting the battered Black Hawk into the night sky. The jungle blurred beneath, a dark ocean of leaves and shadow, but the men inside weren't looking down. They were looking at the empty space between them. Williams knelt over, his gloves soaked, eyes wide with stubborn hope. He checked vitals again and again, whispering prayers he didn't even believe in. Murphy sat slumped on the bench, his pistol still in his lap, his head pressed back, eyes burning from smoke and exhaustion. Tors drifted in and out, mumbling words too soft to catch. Sat upright, his rifle still clutched in his hands, his jaw locked, his gaze fixed forward. None of them spoke the name, but all of them thought it. Vega. Ghost. She hadn't climbed aboard. Down below, the jungle still burned. Explosions echoed like fatting thunder. Muzzle flashes blinked like dying stars. The storm she had unleashed still raged, her detonators ripping through the enemy lines, her rifle cutting down the last wave with clinical finality. She was still down there, alone. Fighting not for victory, not for glory, but to buy them one more minute. And one more after that. Until there were no more minutes left to give. Williams pressed harder on his chest, his voice cracking. She's still down there, Skipper, we can't just leave her. Murphy turned his head, his face streaked with blood and mud. You think she was ever coming with us? His voice broke on the words. She made her choice. Williams shook his head violently. No, we should go back, we should. Doc, his voice was sharp but not cruel. Williams froze. His eyes stayed forward, unblinking. She didn't stay because she had to. She stayed because she chose to. You try to take that away, you dishonor her. The words hit harder than gunfire. Williams looked down, his chest heaving, his hands still locked on. He wanted to argue, to scream, to demand they turn the bird around. But deep down, he knew was right. Ghost had been gone long before the rotors arrived. The Black Hawk cut through the night, the jungle vanishing into horizon. Murphy stared at the floor, his jaw tight. Nobody back home is gonna believe this, he muttered. A ghost saving us, A captain we were told was dead. They'll call it a story, a myth, another war tale. Williams lifted his head, his eyes raw. Then maybe that's what she wanted, to be a story, to stay with them down there. Torres stirred, whispering through bloodied lips. She was real. Finally turned his head, his gaze heavy on each of them. We don't decide if she's real, she does, and down there she's more real than any of us. For a long while no one spoke. Only the rotors filled the silence. But each man carried the same weight in his chest. The image of her silhouette against the burning jungle, her rifle cracking in the night, her voice cutting through static one last time, run. Hours later, when the bird touched down at a forward base, medics swarmed the wounded. Williams fought to stay with until hands pulled him away. Murphy cursed at the doctors trying to move him, his pistol finally taken from his hand. Torres was stretchered off, still whispering fragments of prayers. Stepped onto the tarmac, his boots heavy against the steel, his body broken but upright. He watched his men vanish into triage tents, watched the blades of the Black Hawk slow to silence, watched the horizon where the jungle still burned far away. He thought of her, the woman who should have been dead, the woman who had saved them, the woman who had chosen ghosts over life. 2 days later, command demanded his report. They wanted details, numbers, enemy strength, weapons used, casualties sustained. He gave them what they asked for, clean, efficient, by the book. But when they asked about her, about Vega, he hesitated. "Are you saying she survived?" the colonel pressed, disbelief in his voice. "That's impossible. She's been listed KIA for 2 years. His jaw tightened. His words came slow, deliberate. "I'm saying we survived." He said nothing more. Back in the barracks, Williams sat with his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. Murphy stared at the ceiling, silent for once. Torres lay drugged in a cot, mumbling the same name over and over like a prayer, and stood alone outside, looking at the horizon. The jungle swayed in the distance, whispering. He thought of her rifle cracking through the night, of her voice calm in the storm, of her eyes haunted, hollow, burning. He thought of the way she had said, "I don't leave ghosts behind." And he realized she hadn't, because now she was one of theirs. Some nights long after, they would dream of her. Murphy, in his half-sleep, would hear her whisper through the static. Williams would see her crouched in the shadows, handing him gear that saved a brother's life. Torres would wake in sweat, convinced she was watching from the tree line, and would sit in silence, staring at the dark, waiting to hear her voice one last time. They never spoke of it outside the team, not to command, not to families, not to anyone. Because legends don't need telling. Legends live in silence. As the months passed, her name faded again from files. Officially, Vega remained KIA. Unofficially, in the memories of 6 men who should have died but didn't, she remained something else. Not alive, not dead. A ghost who had whispered back when they pleaded in desperation. Sometimes would walk past the memorial wall, names carved in stone, endless rows of the fallen. His men would stop, sometimes tracing a name with trembling fingers, but never touched the stone, because one name wasn't there, and he didn't know if it ever should be. Somewhere in the jungle, far from the reach of command or country, a rifle lay propped against a ruined wall. Mud stained the barrel. Blood stained the ground. The trees swayed, carrying whispers that never truly left. And maybe, just maybe, Vega was still there. Not alive. Not gone. But watching. Waiting. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.